We've all seen those ads for temptingly cheap Bentleys. But should you do it? Well, our colleagues at Classics World bought a 1990 Turbo R, sight unseen during 2020's lockdown, we might add, to find out.
Basically, we've done what we always advise people never ever to do, and indeed we've done what every Rolls-Royce and Bentley specialist I've ever spoken to has said not to do. We've gone and bought a Turbo R, sight unseen, over the internet. What could possibly go wrong? This was a £91,000 car in 1989. It is a little bit dirty because the chap who delivered it to us had to drive it here simply because at 2.4 tonnes it was too big to fit on his transporter. These are off-road tyres basically. We got Pirelli Scorpions. The choice of a 4x4 owner, so those really belong on a Shogun, not on a Turbo R. I think this little spat here could do with replacing. I bet that's not expensive, although you do have to wonder what it might conceal. One of the specialists I spoke to a while back said a lot of these cars have been knocked on the corner simply because they're so big, so this is no surprise. Boot is aluminium, so it's oxidised quite badly and the paint's flaked off, but that is hardly the end of the world. I've got a little bit more bubbling under the door handle here, and there's a little bit under here as well. I don't think any of that is alarming, actually. So the interior, it's pretty nice. Could probably do with a bit of colouring and cleaning, but it's not split. The piping doesn't seem to have split, and the leather itself is fine. We've got a Blaupunkt Bamberg top-of-the-line cassette player. Michael Crawford performs Andrew Lloyd Webber. That may not be staying there. We've got something absolutely tremendous. Look, we've got a fixed portable Motorola. I don't think we're going to get any calls on that. Here she is. Oh. All 6 3/4 litres of her.
Turbocharged as well.
Rolls-Royce was always very coy about power figures in this era. They always just described it as being adequate. But when they sold the cars on the German market, the authorities required them to disclose the actual power figure. So I think this one's something like 350, 380, something like that. So it's enough. And under bonnet sort of quilting. First impressions then, I think we've bought a presentable and outwardly quite an honest car, is what I'm going to say for now. Perhaps we better listen to a bit of Michael Crawford playing Andrew Lloyd Webber. It's not really my thing, to be honest. I haven't driven one of these cars for a while, and it's funny how they remind you of an older Range Rover, really. You sit so high up, and they do feel like a massive beast when you first get in them. Quite fitting, really, because we've got this off-road tyres anyway. Just adjust my electric seat, and it works. Well, I've done a couple of miles and it's certainly pretty quiet and relaxed, I'll give it that much. All I can hear is a slight creaking of leather. There's no clonking and banging from the suspension or anything like that, so first impressions, pretty good. Seems to drive pretty straight.
With the sun shining and the Bentley looking good, things were going well. And then they weren't.
Oh, I think we've got a problem. We got the charge warning light on and the ABS light. So I think we're going to have to pull over. This certainly explains why the charge warning light came on and the ABS light. So not entirely sure what to do now. Probably head back to our company car park, I think. Well, we've had our Bentley for a while now, and apart from that small hiccup initially when it threw its alternator belt, it's been all right. We've covered quite a few miles in it, but we really don't know quite what's hiding behind the scenes to trip us up. So we've come here today to Nigel Sandell's place in Isleworth. What they don't know here about Rolls-Royces and Bentleys of frankly any age isn't worth knowing. So these people are going to tell us whether we've bought an absolute rotter or whether we've got lucky. What have you found then, Nigel? You've had it up on the ramp for a few seconds now.
Well, sort of usual sorts of traits. We've got a bit of corrosion down in this bottom right-hand rear corner here. Again, this isn't uncommon. The poor old spare wheel carrier looks like the mice have been in there and had a go at eating that. Handbrake's been obviously got lots and lots of grease on it. Again, these are very common. They get lots of water in, lots of salt.
Presumably, is that why someone's greased them so heavily, do you think?
Yeah, I think we've got an oil leak just looking from the front end, and it's blowing back onto the back of the axle here. This oil here, I think this is all blowing back from the front. If you look, there's all oil all over, it's washed all the exhaust system.
It doesn't seem to drop any oil on my driveway, but
Right.
it has just done 100 miles this morning.
That's right. So it's pumped it out the top of the gearbox. So looks like I've got a bit of oil coming down from the steering rack as well. Again, it's had a steering rack, it's had a replacement, so that may be engine oil, but of course because the rack's at the bottom, everything tends to culminate around the bottom of the engine, if that makes sense. We've got a slight bit of dampness on that front caliper there. Can you see that? There's a bit of dampness around this caliper here. So
Otherwise though, the suspension and brakes seem fine. Apparently the corroded headlamp bezels are quite common owing to the hammering they get from stone chips.
these camber bushes are torn. That's his knock on the front. So these couple of camber bushes in the front here, these little camber bushes, they're just starting to separate. So you've got these hydraulic struts, and again, they're quite common to leaking, but they all look nice and dry. This is all a bit out of line here. I don't know, you look at that quarter bumper, yeah. When this is constructed, when this is made, what happens is that they suspend the studs inside the plastic, or inside the molten composite they make the bumper out of. And what's happened is, over a period of time, the rust gets in, especially being right behind the back wheel. We get all the crud goes up there.
You can feel it swelling inside as the brackets
right.
obviously coming out of the rubber.
It's doing that, and unfortunately,
I think I'll just leave that.
So these top shock absorber bushes, they knock out, and you can see that's gone off centre. So that bush there should be dead in the middle. It should be right over there, as you can see.
Next, Nigel plugs a set of hydraulic accumulator pressure gauges into the test ports and firstly releases all the pressure from the system by continually pumping the brake pedal.
First bit of the test is the 0 to 1000 psi pressure, and that's going to be what we call the gas pressure in the sphere. All right. Yes. So Josh, if you fire it up, please. Click up on the end of the stalk, just turn away. So that one's got 900 in it, and that one's got 900 in it as well. So that's
okay, is it?
Yeah, they're only made to 1100, so they're fairly new, if that makes sense. So what we're going to do now is going to increase the revs up slightly. So the next part of the test, we want to make sure that they're both going up to maximum pressure.
And the maximum is 1100?
No, 2500.
Next, we see how much pressure the accumulators can muster.
Right, so he stops at about 2350. This one, if you look at this one's got a problem. This one's only going up to 1500. Because what happens is, when you apply this pressure, you have to return it under low pressure to the reservoir. See where it cuts back in again now, right? Give it a little rev. See, that one cuts back in at 1900. So that's the recovery of the system. Yes. So we know that one there, 1900, that one there, he gets a tick. There's nothing wrong with that one. This one, can you do the other one? Can you pump it down again, please?
With all the pressure pumped out, our other accumulator only goes up to around 1500. So what could be the cause of that?
It could be the height control. So the height control could be just done one where it's bypassing one of the height control valves. It could be a distribution valve. It's very unlikely. What we need to do is we need to break it down into systems. So the first thing we would do is we would just test the brake pump, the accumulator and the valve body. We'd disconnect the rest of the car, test that. It could be the valve body.
Finally, how much residual pressure would we have for the brakes if the engine failed?
How many pumps was that? 50. That one's gone as well now. You've got quite a lot of residual. That's what you want to know, that you've got some safety in there. It's got a distributor drive belt on this car.
Yes.
A little tooth belt. And we might want to have a look through the service history, find out it should be changed every 30,000 miles. If it snaps, unfortunately, you run on 4 cylinders, the car's going nowhere.
What's the verdict then, Nigel?
Well, I think we've done all right, chaps. To be honest, it doesn't look too bad.
Excellent.
Yeah, so a couple of bits of corrosion and whatever, but I think in the main, it's a fairly usable,
It's safe and it's usable. That's good.
That's all you want, I think. Do you know what I'm saying? And you've got some work to do, some bits and bobs.
First port of call was the battered rear bumper corner. And how hard can that be to replace?
The bracket is well and truly gone on this one, as you can see. And someone's done a really nasty bodge. They've used a big crosshead screwdriver straight into the bumper bracket to just hold the corner moulding on. You've got to wind out the screw before you even start. Oh, that's nasty. So that's how broken this is. This is completely sheared. This stud should go into here. It's completely sheared off. We've got a spring and a clip and a bracket. And this is massively over-engineered, but it allows the thing to move if you do bang it. I'm going to stop here because I have a nasty feeling that these are captive bolts and they're going to fall inside. There. There's our bodged up crosshead screw, which was
just horribly screwed into the aluminium bumper bar here. And this is just the sort of thing you only find on Rolls-Royce of this era. Mounting studs are well and truly welded into the aluminium bumper. I had to use a big lever, but I've just managed to get this bolt out. Even if we don't want to reuse these studs, of course we need the holes free to fix the new part in with some bolts. This complicated spring bracket arrangement is riveted into the bumper corner, so it needs drilling out and then riveting in on the new one, I guess. We'll drill out the rivets. There we go. It needs to go like that. No, it doesn't. It goes like that. I've decided to go without the rivets. I've gone one better than Rolls-Royce, in fact. I've used a pair of little nuts and bolts, which I think is a bit more elegant, to be honest. It's going to tighten it up here. I've even used washers. What about that? Proper job. Stainless steel they are. Won't rust again. And I can reassemble this strange spring bracket, which I've had to dismantle really to make this work. One of the biggest difficulties in doing this job is not trashing your new bumper corner on the ground, so you definitely need to be using some cardboard or something. Okay, we can now put that back there. There we go. Let's wait for the thread to bite in here, and we're done. So we've got it all bolted up again. It's not perfect. We need to get the right bolt to go in the rear fixing here. I've slid the aluminium trim piece in. It's reasonably tight. I'm going to look at it again later on because it's been bashed and misshapen here, so really we want to get a new piece of this to make it look quite right again. But anyway, not bad for a quick job really, and it's certainly smartened it up already.
Next, Paul handed the Bentley over to Rob Hawkins from Classics Monthly magazine. So 3 weeks later, what was it like to fix, overhaul and service a Bentley yourself?
3 weeks ago, you dropped the car off to me. I thought, well, we've got a 3-week deadline, lots to do on it, but the basic thing was to look at the mechanical aspects, get it serviced properly, do all the engine oils, gearbox and diff oils, check the brakes over and see what we need to change. And that sort of opened a bit of can of worms really, because whilst the servicing was easy, and I did most of the servicing myself, steering rack leak, so we needed a new steering rack. Rear brakes, we're pretty much past it, so we changed all the rear brakes, all the calipers as well, which meant the handbrake pads as well were changed. Looked at the fuel lines, they were perished, they were rusty, thought it's safer to change them. They weren't leaking, but I knew for a fact they would be leaking in maybe a year's time. Luckily, these guys at Prestige have helped us. I put plenty of time in myself as well, so I've learnt an awful lot about the car. I suddenly discovered how easy it is to change the oil in the engine, the gearbox and the diff. Loads of space. When it came to doing the fuel lines, again I just volunteered and thought we'll have a go. I was quite surprised at how much space there was and how straightforward it was. A bit complex when you come to the hydraulics, such as the suspension system and the brakes, but we're only talking the fluid systems and various things that just need knowledge, and luckily these guys at Prestige had that knowledge and they could guide me. Otherwise I'd have been stuck, and that's really the point I think we need to make here, is that you can look at it and you can apply a general principle towards fixing things, but you do need specialist knowledge sometimes for certain procedures. Power steering fluid pipe blew off and all the fluid leaked over the floor. It was just looking at it and trying to predict what was going to happen in the future and thinking we should preserve this and we should have preventative maintenance. Parts are brilliant. I can't believe what Flying Spares managed to get hold of. And also the reconditioning things. So you look at the steering rack, you think it would be a fortune, and it wasn't. Same with the rear calipers. And the hardest thing, would you believe it, is the spare wheel carrier. If you wanted a new one, it's over £1,000. So we managed to take ours off and repair it because there's a bit of rust on it. Got it all painted up, back on, looks as good as new. I reckon you could do most jobs, definitely. You do most jobs yourself. The hardest bit comes when you want to do pressure testing of the system for the hydraulic brakes and hydraulic suspension. But the rest of the stuff, especially with a good workshop manual, most of the servicing jobs you could do yourself for definite. But bear in mind, things are awkward. Taking those rear calipers off, there's about 4 brake pipes to undo, which will be seized. But not only that, you can't get the caliper off unless you've loosened 4 massive bolts that hold the hub to the trailing arm. So mechanically it's a great car, I think, to use, but if you want to win any concourse competitions, it might not scrape through yet.
Mechanically sound and usable, that'll do me just fine. And now it's time to jump aboard for the long drive south. So there you have it. Inspect carefully, go in aware of the parts prices and a willingness to get your hands dirty, and you really can own, fix and maintain a Bentley yourself.